In the year 1924, a French engineer quietly placed a short length of copper wire into his vegetable patch. No artificial nutrients, no soil amendments, not a single grain of chemical fertilizer was introduced. Astonishingly, within a single growing period, his harvest yields doubled. By the conclusion of the second season, upwards of 150,000 horticulturalists across the European continent were replicating this exact procedure. Then, with an almost instantaneous disappearance, the method vanished. The wire was removed from the earth, the research was relegated to obscurity, and the published works ceased to be printed. For the ensuing century, garden enthusiasts globally continued to transport heavy sacks of synthetic fertilizers home from garden supply stores, utterly unaware that a nearly cost-free alternative had been discreetly interred. Not in the soil, but within the annals of history. This is the chronicle of that overlooked ingenuity.
It encompasses a visionary innovator who was sidelined from mainstream discourse, a government report that remained concealed within locked cabinets for decades, the ethereal luminescence of the aurora borealis, and a combination of three elementary items commonly found in most households presently. More significantly, it is a narrative that culminates in a garden, perhaps your own, where depleted, lackluster soil is revitalized without the necessity of a single chemical product, and the entire setup requires mere minutes to complete. 1. The 1920s phenomenon that faded away. The 1920s marked a peculiar turning point for agricultural practices. On one trajectory was the burgeoning field of industrial chemistry, promising to sustain a burgeoning global population through synthetically produced nitrogen manufactured in vast industrial complexes. Opposing this was a more understated movement, comprising a dispersed collection of farmers, engineers, and scientists who held the conviction that the essential solution was literally present in the air, above us. This was not an abstract notion, but a tangible, measurable terrestrial force upon which plants had subsisted for eons, predating humanity's first cultivation of a seed. Among these individuals was Justin Christofleau, a French engineer and agronomist whose assertion was so audacious it bordered on imprudent. He claimed he could enhance crop productivity by as much as 200% by merely employing copper and zinc antennas inserted directly into the ground. This involved no artificial feeding, no recurring expenditure, no ongoing subscription, and no annual procurement. It was simply a one-time installation that took minimal time and a few centimeters of metallic conductor. Christofleau's claims were not based on conjecture or abstract theory alone. He established what he termed a potager électrique, an electric vegetable garden, on his own property, meticulously documenting his findings with the precision characteristic of an engineer. His uncomplicated copper and zinc apparatuses, conceived to harness what he described as electromagnetic telluric celestial energy, facilitated more rapid seed germination, visibly accelerated plant development, and imparted remarkable resilience against both drought and disease. His neighbors could readily observe the distinct improvements from their adjoining properties. The outcomes were so consistent and reliably reproducible that over 150,000 of his devices were disseminated to agriculturalists and domestic gardeners prior to the commencement of the Second World War. 150,000. This was not a minor, isolated movement. It represented a continent actively taking notice. Therefore, a pertinent question arises, deserving of a forthright response. If this method proved so effective and was witnessed firsthand by so many, what became of it? The temporal context offers a crucial insight. During the same decade that Christofleau was marketing his copper antennas, the Haber-Bosch process for synthesizing nitrogen was expanding into a global industry valued in the billions. Major agrochemical conglomerates were constructing their entire business frameworks around a singular foundational premise: that farmers would perpetually purchase fertilizer each and every season, year after year, and generation after generation. A singular copper wire that drew free energy from the atmosphere did not align with this business model. It did not merely fail to conform, it posed a direct threat to the financial viability of the entire sector. Christoflo himself documented facing persistent opposition from individuals associated with the chemical fertilizer industry. Whether this opposition was orchestrated or simply a natural consequence of a dominant industry safeguarding its market share is a matter of interpretation. However, the result is undeniable. His methodology receded from public awareness. Concurrently, across the English Channel, the British government was conducting its own inquiry. An entity known as the Electroculture Committee operated discreetly from 1918 to 1936, spanning nearly 2 decades of experimental research. Their trials indicated discernible and reproducible enhancements in crop yields utilizing electrical methodologies. Yet, upon the committee's dissolution, their findings were filed away and never released for public utilization. The records remain. The data was verifiably real, but it never reached the individuals who could have benefited most: the home gardeners and small-scale farmers who were already struggling to afford the chemical products that had supplanted the free alternative. The era of chemicals advanced, and Christoflo's contributions were forgotten. Not due to failure, not due to being disproven, but because it was overshadowed by an industry possessing greater financial resources and a more assertive public presence. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a matter of economic forces at play. However, here is the aspect of this narrative that holds the greatest significance. Scientific understanding possesses a long memory, and the discoveries being made by contemporary researchers suggest that those early pioneers stumbled upon a phenomenon far more profound than a mere gardening technique. They had inadvertently uncovered a fundamental truth regarding the actual mechanisms of plant growth. 2. The Aurora Borealis and the revelation of living electricity. Most individuals with gardening experience grasp the basic requirements. Plants need sunlight, water, and soil-based nutrients. However, there exists a fourth essential element, one that is seldom discussed. This element has been scientifically documented since the 18th century, yet it has inexplicably failed to be incorporated into any gardening manual found on the shelves of local libraries. That element is atmospheric electricity. The narrative commences in 1783, when a French scientist named Abbé Pierre Berthelon observed a peculiar phenomenon during his botanical and meteorological experiments. Plants exposed to atmospheric electrical fields, such as those that naturally form in the air during specific weather conditions, exhibited noticeably accelerated growth and increased robustness compared to plants shielded from these fields. Berthelon became so convinced of this correlation that he designed and constructed a device he christened the electrovegetometer. This apparatus was specifically engineered to channel atmospheric electricity into cultivated plots. By contemporary standards, the device was rudimentary, but the underlying principle was sound. More importantly, it yielded positive results. The crops responded. Approximately 60 years later, in 1841, the Scottish inventor Alexander Bain advanced the concept further. Bain developed what he called an earth battery, consisting of pairs of copper and zinc plates buried in the soil. These plates generated a subtle electrical current through the chemical interaction between the metals and the ambient moisture. Farmers who implemented his system noted a distinct and undeniable effect. Plants cultivated between these buried plates grew more rapidly, stood taller, and yielded heavier harvests than any others in their respective fields. The effect was visible, reproducible, and involved minimal cost after the initial installation. However, the most striking evidence emerged from an unexpected locale: the frigid periphery of the Arctic Circle. In the late 1800s, a Finnish geophysicist named Carl Selm Lemström, a professor at the University of Helsinki, journeyed north to study the Aurora Borealis. While the northern lights were his primary research subject, his observations of the terrestrial landscape beneath them fundamentally altered his understanding of plant physiology. In these extreme northern latitudes, characterized by exceptionally short growing seasons, subdued sunlight, and soil that remained frozen for much of the year, the vegetation was not stunted, it was thriving. Trees attained surprising heights, ground cover was luxuriantly green and vigorous, and wildflowers bloomed with an intensity that seemed improbable given the environmental conditions. Lemström dedicated years to his investigation,